JayDreamerZ, think outside the box.
Hey, what's up everybody, and thanks for joining me for today's live stream. We're going to be talking about the elven race versus or the reptilian race, with an emphasis and focus on the reptilian race itself. Now, before we get into that, I do want to preface this by saying reptilians are really silica-based beings. They are not a lizard race of spacemen. They are the gods of old, from nearly every culture since the beginning of the known written record. They are the vampires, the vulcans, the elves, the El, and the elohim. They are the serpents, the nephalim, the angels, the devils, the aliens, the blue beings, the aryans, the aesir, the vanir, the giants, and much more. To say that the silica beings of old and of legend are lizard or fish people is the same as saying that mankind must have evolved from monkeys. Now, with that being said, I'm going to put on some slides behind me as we go along, and I'm going to comment on a lot of them. But I would like to start off with talking about some of the traditions of where we get this concept of reptilian beings, or the fish gods of old. So whenever we talk about, the reptilian-like aliens or whatnot, we ask ourselves, where does this concept come from, right? I know it's been very caricaturized. A caricature, for those of you who have ever had one done, you sit down in front of an artist and he sort of makes a cartoon, larger-than-life image of you. That's a caricature. Now, whenever I talk about these ancient myths and legends and lore of a time long forgotten that I refer to as ancient Oblivion, so often I have found that those truths that once were established, that once were a way of life, that once were common knowledge and the way that the world was, that world befell cataclysm. That world fell apart. That world was destroyed. And we now live in an entirely different type of a world. Same realm, but it's much different than it used to be. Now, those things that once were have fallen down to us in the form of lore and legend and myth and fantasy. However, it doesn't mean we should dismiss it all as being fake, not real, lies. It's just entertainment and amusement. It's not. These are the things that had the most important impact on ancient history that's been kept from us, including and especially the concept of these reptilian beings. And basically, whenever we start talking about where did this whole concept of the lizard gods or the fish gods of old come from, we want to talk about some of the tribal traditions, okay? Some of the oldest traditions. You see, there are still many parts of the world, well, not so many, but there are still some parts of the world that don't send their children off to go get indoctrinated within the system, but they actually teach. They pass down the legends from generation to generation. They pass down the stories. It's called legend because the story of what had happened is written down in a legend, in a ledger. Or it's an oral tradition, which means it was passed down as a story from one person to another, from one generation to another. And these stories, they make it into our myths, our lore, our stories, our fairy tales, which, by the way, I will get to a little later on. There's a lot of truth behind the word itself, fairy tale, the tale of the fairies. But let's start with the tribes, the tribal stories. here's a few renditions, a few images. A lot of people have seen these reptilian beings, and I have found that I progressed in gleaning from all of these different accounts and stories and myths and everything. What I do is I use comparative mythology. I see what stacks up, what lines up, which stories all share the exact same imagery or details or descriptions or events or characters. And we put those ones off to the side and say, these must be related. These must convey a stronger sense of truth than everything else. We put it off to the side and say, hey, these all match up across the world cultures and across time, so there's something to this. So not only do we have ancient tribes and still tribes that exist today, which I'll talk about here in a second, but we have personal accounts of people having seen these things. Now, when we take into account the stories that people tell, like I saw a reptilian, or my brother's a reptilian, or whatever, or if you're watching YouTube and you're seeing all the reptilian shapeshifter, pixelation videos and whatnot, and people flapping their tongues out too much and stuff, which I've been accused of. It's good to take into account like some sense of being patient, allowing these things to build up and marinate. It's all about putting all of the clues together. They form such a stronger truth. They become much weightier, much heavier. The evidence becomes overwhelming in total. It's I'm so sorry. It's not about one specific piece of evidence. It's not about one event that had happened or one picture that somebody drew, one experience that people have. It's about the collective information brought together and compiled and compared one with the other and with the total, right? So let's talk about some of these ancient tribes. So we've got, first of all, records from around the world. Okay, this isn't a one-time happening. This isn't something that was small in a particular far-off tribe or anything like that. This applies. This whole reptilian god, the lizard or fish gods of old. These stories, these historical accounts, are all across the realm. They include the Zulu tribe, the Dogon, the Aborigines, which are one of my favorite ones, the Mayan, the Aztec, the Inca, etc., and so on and so forth. I should probably throw in the Japanese as well. The Japanese, the Chinese. It's everywhere, really. I found all around our realm these stories of the fish gods or the reptile gods or the lizard gods or the lizard beings or aliens. And if you don't like the word god or angel or alien, feel free to just substitute it with whatever one you have a better understanding of, just take what resonates and put the rest on hold for the time being. Now, this particular picture, I want to talk about some of these pictures right here. I also want to give a big thank you to Edvard. Edvard on the Facebook group posted these pictures and brought it to my attention, which is really interesting. I want to talk about Edvard's name a little later, the spelling of it at least. Now, as you can see from the picture here, there are certain traditions amongst these ancient tribes where they will try to look like Full-Time Geek, funded $5 on Super Chat. Thank you. Says, Jay, do you ever look into the archaeological discoveries of Ron Wyatt? No, but I will go back and I will, read all the comments and stuff a little later and check out everything you guys recommend. And thank you for your donation, by the way. So what's happening here? What do you see right here? Well, what you're seeing is the intentional scarring of the tribal people. They would scar their bodies and give themselves what looks like artificial reptilian type scales or skin. They call these in some tribes the crocodile men. And you would ask yourself, why would anyone ever want to do such a thing? It's not fashion. It's not like how we, pierce our ears to look cool, or our nose, or our whatever people are piercing these days. This had nothing to do with fashion and trying to look cool or things of that nature. This was seen as paying homage This was spiritual. This was a rite of passage. This was something so much more than just, some trendy thing that was happening amongst the tribal people. They don't have cinnamon challenges and, all of this weird stuff that we have today, okay? This had deep implication. The implication was that they were trying to look like, to emulate their gods. And we've seen this across many cultures in our history. Those of you who are familiar with Ancient Aliens, the TV show, they had talked about on a few different episodes how there are those cultures who try to emulate the gods having this sort of cone-shaped head, this sort of skull that goes back a bit further, right? So they would purposefully shape the skulls of their children so that they would grow into that sort of shape. Here you have another example of people who are scarring their skin in order to give themselves this sort of reptilian, scaly, lizardy, or depending on how you want to see it, fish-like, because fish also have scales. It's something that we're familiar with. Appearance. Most notably, we also have the Dogon and the Numo, the tales and legends of the Numo or Nomo. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But I really want to continue on with this whole trying to emulate the look of the gods, the appearance of the ancient beings, those, whether they be reptilian or whatnot. Now, as we go further along in this video, I will break down what is reptilian, fish people, how it relates to the gods, because I just refer to them as the ancient gods because it's one of the easiest ways to convey that. They're really not gods, but we'll get into that later on, okay? But the point is that these people revered these beings. They held these beings in such high esteem that they wanted to look just like them. They wanted to be like the gods. Now, do you think that this is located specifically to these tribal people? Oh, they're just tribal people and, they don't know any better, they have a savage mentality, which is kind of how many of us think, or we tend to think when we think about tribal, uneducated, uncivilized worlds within our world, However, if you've seen some of my other videos, like the Elven Beauty Standard, which I may remake that one, but we are not without our exception. We also try to look like and emulate the gods. They are our beauty standard. I'll give you an example. Why do people insist upon shaving the face and being so smooth-skinned and clean cut and whatnot? It is because of these gods that made themselves known. We are trying to emulate. They were smooth-skinned and clean-cut and whatnot. Thank you for the donation, Jessica. Also just funded some money on the super chat. Yay. So we are not without our exceptions. Everyone has done this. Everyone has done this from the beginning of our written record. We revere the gods. We name our car companies after the gods. We design our symbols after the gods. We are not unlike the unsophisticated, uncivilized tribal worlds, okay? Wow. thedailyplane.com funded $10. Thank you as well. So let's move on to the next few pictures here. Now, while I show you these pictures, I'm going to get specifically into one of my favorite tribes, the Dogon. The Dogon. We say Dogon, right? Dogon is basically spelled D-O-G, dog. Actually, let me just go ahead and write this down so you can see it. Hey, by the way, I have a new feature on my channel here, which is my whiteboard. As you can see, handy dandy whiteboard. We're going to get into all this other stuff here a little bit later on, but this is how you spell Dogon. D-O-G and then O-N. Dog-on. Now, this word right here in ancient languages literally means fish, basically. So the fish people, okay? Those of the fish and whatnot. Okay, so let's go back to here. Pardon me. Now, the Dogon are probably most well known for particular stories involving aliens. The story goes that there were some French people that came in that wanted to get to know the Dogon, which wasn't really what was happening, right? The French wanted to take over the Dogon. They wanted to take over much of Africa, and not just the French, but there were a lot of people wanting to take over and whatnot. However, they sent their emissaries, they sent their representatives down there to talk to the Dogon people, right? To get to know them. One of the things that had happened is the Dogon shared their history. They shared their origins. They talked about their gods, like who they worshipped and whatnot. Now, I can imagine this conversation came up because the Caucasian people were probably trying, and this is my assumption, they were probably trying to convert the Dogon to Christianity or whatnot, which we'll talk about that as well a little bit later on. So the Dogon story goes that there were these fish gods, basically. They were these amphibious gods that had this scaly, sort of shiny skin. And they came down and they spoke with the Dogon and they explained to them where the Dogon people had come from and how they were created and what their origins were. Not only that, but they also spoke with the Dogon about where they came from. And they gave the Dogon some mysterious information about the star systems. Now, the thing that makes it interesting is that the gods of the Dogon explained to them in such fine detail about the particular star system, which is I believe it was the Sirius system, Sirius A and B. The star system as it was described being binary, or actually in reality I believe it's trinary, if that's a word. It was described, and it was something that was not known at the time. The civilized world had no idea that there was another star really close to that one particular star, the Sirius star. So the Caucasians' minds were blown. They were like, how do you know this? And the Dogon, I can imagine, were like, I just told you. Were you not listening? My gods came down, the creator beings, these fish gods came down and they explained it to us. How else did we get this information, you know? So that's one interesting story about it. Now, the name of the gods are the Numo or the Nomo. They are basically the fish type, lizard type gods. And I'm just going to read here. The key spiritual figures in the religion were the Numo or Nomo. Twins. Now, there were these two main gods. They were twin gods. They were brothers. Now, for those of you who are on the same path, you may have encountered this whole twin god story happening from time to time across different cultures and across history, right? We've got this concept of these two brothers who were once twins, and, you know, they were at war with each other and their families went to war with each other, and so on and so forth. This is no exception to that rule. We've got these two twin reptilian type gods that came down and spoke with the Dogon. And according to the descriptions of them, the Numo, whom were also referred to as the serpent, were amphibious and were often compared to serpents, lizards, chameleons, and some other things there. They were also described as fish, capable of walking on land. While they were on land, the Numo stood upright on their tails. The Numo's skin was primarily green, according to tradition, but like the chameleon, it sometimes changed colors. It was said to, at times, have the colors, all the colors, of the rainbow. Now, this is really important because remember how I said, let's talk about comparing all of these legends and all of these histories and all of these stories from around the world, across our realm and across time. This is something that appears over and over and over. We've got these beings that are being described as best as the people could describe them. They know that fish have scales. Not only do the fish have scales, but if you look at a fish's scales, right, it tends to have this shiny effect to it. Depending on, you know, how the light is and how you're looking at the fish, the scales sort of shine, right? Or these tribal people, they were familiar with lizards. They know that lizards, serpents, snakes, that they have these sort of shiny kind of scales as well. So they saw these beings that looked similar in their skin, that had this sort of scaly, shiny skin, and they said, okay, well, we're going to call them the fish people. It does not mean that they were literally fish that walked around and looked like fish, and it does not mean that they were literally lizard people, that look more like that statue picture I showed earlier, that looks like a big lizard head with sharp pointy teeth and the split tongue and all that. It simply means that they were trying to describe them in the way that they knew how the best. They may not have had a deep understanding of the science behind the breakdown of the composition of those beings' skin and what was involved in their chemical makeup and their DNA. So it was much easier to just say, yeah, those are the fish gods. Those are the lizard gods, okay? So here's another picture right behind me. Now, this is not so much scarring, okay? This is, they would actually take rocks and they would put them in the skin in order to sort of make these fake kind of horns, okay? And this was also to emulate the gods. If you've seen, the Star Wars, there's the bad guy Darth Maul. Darth Maul has these sort of horns sticking out. And in ancient Middle Eastern cultures, some of them, the way that the gods were portrayed as far as their hierarchy, who was in charge of who had the most power, depended upon how many horns they had on their head. The more horns, the higher up in power that they were. Now, were they actual horns that came out of the body, or were they hats? Were they some sort of ornaments? I'm not 100% sure, but what is known is that they appeared to have some sort of horns in addition to the scaly composition of their skin, right? And here's another example of the alligator men trying to emulate and look like the gods. Now, from what I read earlier as well, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things before we move forward. I'm going to get to the fish part. The fish being capable of walking on land. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute, and we'll connect that with Christianity. And they stood upright on their tails. Well, isn't it interesting? They are described as having tails, and mankind has a tailbone. But we don't seem to understand or can even put together, rarely do we even talk about why we have a tailbone, except for the very simple explanation that, we sort of kind of look like the monkeys, or they sort of kind of look like us, and monkeys, some of them have tails. So guess what? We must be evolved versions of monkeys, right? That doesn't sit well with many of you, right? To hear that you are, your great ancestors were just monkeys, and you're just, something happened and some of the monkeys never evolved and they just decided we like being monkeys, and some evolved into human beings, right? And so that's where we got our tail, because we decided that we're too cool to have tails and they don't matter and we don't really need tails. So our tails sort of shrank, and now we just have a little stub, right? Well, these god beings that tell all of these cultures, we made you, we are your creators, we not only made you, but we made you in our image. They're saying, these tribes are saying that these godlike beings, these okay, we're going to break down the word El here in a bit too. These El, or what I refer to as the Elven race, these Silica beings, are said to have had tails, scaly type skin, and some sort of, sometimes, not always, but sometimes are described as having what look like and appear to be horns. Now, the Numo's skin was primarily green, as it is said, to the Dogon, but like the chameleon, it sometimes changed colors. Well, isn't that interesting, right? That's another attribute that they have this ability to sort of change colors. And I'm going to talk about the whole changing colors thing as well, because sometimes these ancient Silica beings are described as being albino white. Not albinos, but like an albino in how white their skin was. Porcelain white skin. My skin, as you can see, is not pure white. You can actually see the red from the blood in my body through the skin itself. So the redness really shows through in the Caucasian skin at the very least. I'm not talking about Caucasians. I'm talking about white beings, like pure white as a piece of paper, right? As white as a ghost, as they would say. Now, the last thing that's interesting is it was said at times that their skin would have all the colors of the rainbow. Welcome, CB90222. Just subscribed. They would have all the colors of the rainbow in their skin, much like, I don't know if you've ever seen like a rainbow trout or some fish. They almost look like they change colors depending on how they move and how the light hits them and whatnot. But interestingly enough, there are other tribes, there are other cultures out there who also have described these beings as having multicolored skin like a rainbow. Their skin, their scaly type skin shines like that of the fish that shines all these different colors. The Aborigine people, they have the rainbow serpent, the rainbow snake, which is one of their main gods, right? It's a rainbow snake. It's the rainbow boa, which is really interesting to me that they would all fall in line and have so many similarities. So now let's go from talking about the tribal people, right, who purposefully damaged their body out of reverence and honor and respect for their gods, who literally looked like this. They want to look just like their gods. To talking about the gods themselves. Here's one of these pictures. I believe this one is Aboriginal, I want to say, cave painting. And I find it interesting that these gods not only have these same scaly type, skin as they put it on there, but they're also that same albino pasty white color as well. But they were described as being the fish people. Now, sometimes you can find in some of these ancient cave paintings where they try to draw like this sort of symbol of a fish, but instead of, we have a symbol of a fish as well today, right? We've got the fish that is sideways, and people use it in the religion, especially Christianity today, right? Christians have the symbol of the fish. It's called the ichthys, which is basically, it's just like an acronym, I believe, or an acrostic. Yeah, it's an acrostic. Ichthys basically stands for, let's see, I wrote it down. I forgot where it was. But basically, it's Isus Christos Theo Ios Soter, which basically means something along the lines of like Jesus Christ, the Son of God, our Savior, something along those lines, okay? Don't quote me, but it's something like that, and it's an acrostic. And what they will tell you on the History Channel and, the Discovery Channel and all these channels that are devoted to giving you like the ancient truth about whatnot, whatever it is, what they will say is that the Christians were being so persecuted that they had to make up a symbol that represented it, and they had to come up with this acrostic called ichthys that really meant something about Jesus, and it's really unrelated to the fish, and the fish is just a symbol because of there's a fish in the story in the Bible, etc. That's a lot to put together. Let me tell you what the simple answer is. The simple answer is the fish is one of the symbols, there are many, that represent God, that represent the creator being. Just like these tribal people knew, they didn't have to make up stories and say, oh, well, it's symbolic and it's actually, if you put the letters just right and this and that. No, they say, yes, fish. And the fish symbol, let me see if I have a fish symbol on here. I believe, yes, here we go. So here's the fish symbol, right? Now, have you ever wondered, see at the end where the tail is, why don't they seal off the tail, right? Why don't they put a line from the top part of the tail to the bottom? Because that's, it's all connected. That's what a fish looks like, right? It's not that hard to just seal it off. They leave that part open because if you take that fish symbol and you stand it upright, it represents a fish with legs. a fish that can walk out of the water. It represents the gods of old that were fish-like, amphibious type gods with scaly skin that walked amongst the people. That's why it's left open there on the end of the fish symbol. I'm going to go back to a few of these here. But however, they're the gods, these reptilian scaly gods. This is the rainbow boa. This is the one in the Aboriginal. They were revered. People wanted to be like them. Now, you'll find many traditions where not only we, but the tribal people especially. See, here's the difference between us and the quote-unquote tribal people, the uncivilized world. They're honest. They say, oh yeah, we're doing this in reverence to our gods, or, this is a story that we're acting out. You know what I mean? They will emulate the gods purposefully, and they will tell you that that's what's happening. We pretend as if there are no gods, and we came up with these ideas all on our own according to our beauty standards. But as you can see, many of these tribal people, they would actually paint their faces. I'm just going to check in the chat to make sure. Okay, I just want to make sure everything's working here. Everything is working. Okay, cool. So they would paint their faces literally this same pale, pasty, white color. Why do you think they did that? Is it because they only had access to white paint? No, not at all. They would paint themselves these colors. Now, in particular, see how this one down here, it starts to kind of turn whitish blue. I'm going to get into that as well. I do talk about the blue gods and how they're directly related to these albino, pasty, porcelain-skinned gods. But that's why they do it. They pay homage to their gods. In case I'm just going to put the dots together for this. This is a video I did, so this is my thumbnail I created. But that's the symbolism behind like movies like this, where you've got the pasty white skin. It's not a clown. It doesn't represent a clown. What it represents is the evil versions of these gods, of these silica beings with this white skin, and often you'll find flaming red hair. Which hopefully I'll remember to get back to that as well as that whole letter V there in the middle. But it's symbolic. This right here is a caricature, like I was talking about earlier. For those who are on my Facebook and the Ancient Oblivion archive, you'll see that I posted a caricature of myself. It doesn't look like how I actually look. It's not an exact replica. It's not a painting. But here's the thing. These gods, these silica beings, did not want you to paint them according to what they really looked like. They didn't want their likenesses out there, right? So over time, over descriptions, people had caught glimpses of them. People had seen them, so they painted according to what they were described as being, which over time, people focused on the attributes that really stood out. There is no 100% picture or accurate portrait or painting of a god. They are all turning into caricatures, or you could use the word cartoons. They're basically turning into cartoons. Now, because it's a cartoon, does not take away from the reality of where it came from. Like this. This is a cartoon. This is a drawing. It's an image that's based off of what people have heard. It's based off of the stories, right? In particular, you've got the horned helmet up there, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiers. Maybe 4. I'm not sure if that one counts at the bottom. But this would be Enki, I believe. And he is depicted, oftentimes these gods, because they're cartoons and because they're caricatures, we need context. We need extra pictures thrown in there so that we can differentiate them, right? We can't just draw all the gods the same. We have to add symbols to the image of the god, or to the image of the reptilian, alien beings, angels, whatever you want to call them, so that we can classify which one we're talking about. Which god? There were many. There were a whole bunch. So let's add some extra images to build context to convey the message. This is how our language system developed. It started with pictures like this. Then you add more symbols, more pictures to build context, and then you get a more clear message and a better communication between the one drawing and the one reading or receiving or interpreting, right? So this one right here, people would mostly actually focus on the whole water portion of it, right? He's the water god, the god of the water. Well, There's also fish in there as well. He is the fish god. He's the god of the fish. Or like almost how like the Atlanteans are portrayed. The god of the fish. What is that? What is that new one in the Justice League? The Aquaman, right? Aquaman, the god of the fish, the god of the sea, etc. Triton. All of these things are the same imagery. They're just variations of cartoons that come from the same source, right? This one right here is an image of the fish god, the god that kind of looks like the fish, who is amphibious, who can go in the water and come out of the water, etc. And like I said, we have the symbol of the fish as well, which is also the ribbon that we've turned into for all of our causes, The ribbon is the same symbol, just, they've painted it to look like some sort of ribbon or whatnot, when in reality, ribbons would be tied and be bows and I don't know. But it's done like that for a purpose. It pays homage to the gods, which is all around us, by the way. This is not something that's just esoteric and secret. This is something we as a society, we constantly pay homage to these beings all of the time. We are constantly sending our focus to these beings, sending our energy. Some people would call it worship. But our energy is being directed right at particular beings through sigils and symbols and words and phrases and pictures and traditions, and all of this is sending energy right towards those beings. Now, here is Dagon, right? Dagon. Now, we tend to cowboy our language, right? So Dagon, we could say Dagon, but it's Dagon, right? And I'm going to get into the language thing here in a bit. We're going to check out the whiteboard. But Dagon, or Dagon, Dog, like I said, is the same as the Dogon. There were no vowels in the ancient languages, so vowels are almost always interchangeable. They're usually just to fill in the gaps. They're usually to force people to keep a dialect, to keep an accent, to say things the proper way, to force you how to say it in your mouth, okay? Anyhow, dog, like we said, means fish. Dog, dog, they all mean fish. They come from the word fish. On means one of, okay? It's directly related to our word one, right? So one of the fish. So Dagon is of the fish. The fish god. Now this says, Egypt, but it's actually got like Babylon and stuff like that on there. We also have Onus, or Onus. Various ways to pronounce that. But here are some examples of the fish god. And they would literally wear, the priests of the fish god emulated the gods as well. The priests would dress in scaly type outfits to represent the scales, and they would put this fish hat on their head. Many of you have come across this already and understand that the fish hat, as you can see above me here, is also worn by various cardinals and the Pope and things of that nature. It's the same exact thing. It's the fish hat. It's the head of a fish representing Onus or Dogon or any of these fish gods. I mean, look at right here. You can see they dressed up as fish, putting the whole fish cape behind them with the fish head on top. Let's see. I'm just seeing if I want to read any of this. Not really. I just wanted to give you guys the pictures for it. So many of these gods are represented by a fish. Is it any surprise that Christianity symbolizes their god by a fish? By the way, just as a side note, okay, keep your eyes out for a future video, but not just fish, but rocks as well. That's something else I'm going to be talking about. Unrelated, so moving on. So here's let me get out of the way, but you can see like it's sort of the statue of the fish god, and there's the Ark of the Covenant in the background. The fish god was a reality. It was just as real as any of the other gods that are worshipped across any other culture or any other religion. This one might seem familiar to you. This is literally the Starbucks logo. This is where it comes from. It is the god, it is the silica-based scaly beings that are represented by the symbol of the fish. You ask yourself, and you may have asked many times, why does the Starbucks mermaid have two tails? I will tell you. It's because it is representing a fish that can walk on land. The two tails are just two legs. That's the fish portion of it down there. And it's got two of them because they literally have two legs, just like you do and just like I do. But they animalized it. You know, they changed it into a cartoon or a caricature like I was talking about. Here's another image of those beings that worshipped the amphibious beings. Now, let me make this clear. That does not mean that these beings were literally fish that evolved. And, you know, like we have this concept in our mind that the height of evolution, the height of adaptation is the human figure, that we are just what every animal and everything out there should strive to become one day, that we are the finished product of evolution, which I don't really believe that. So it sounds funny to me, actually. It's sad because we're so self-righteous and we're so, you know, like we just think we are just so amazing. But there are many problems with our body and our composition and being made of carbon and things of that nature. So let's move forward a little bit. Oh, here's another one. This one is, let me think if I can remember the name correctly. This is an avatar, which is a body, you know, one of the many bodies, that was inhabited by Vishnu in the Hindu religion, right? This one played a big role in the Hindu story of the cataclysm of the world flooding over and being filled with the waters and all of those beings drowning. Anyway, the short version is that Vishnu, right, became this half-fish god in order to help out those who he would basically save from the flood waters, right? It's really interesting to me. And you know what? As a side note, I think it's funny because people are always talking about like the flood, like there was a flood. You know, there was a time when the world was once flooded. I'm going to tell you right now, the world is still flooded, okay? Take a look around. There is mostly water everywhere, okay? The world is still flooded. It's not like, hey, do you remember when the world was flooded and all that water went away? No, that water's still here, okay? A lot of it has gone away, but most of it is still here. We call it oceans, which blows my mind. Like, it blows my mind that we can just label stuff and not think twice about it, right? Like all that water that we refer to as oceans, I don't believe it was always there. It's just a remnant of when the world was flooded. Here's another avatar, Vishnu. I believe the name of this particular avatar is Matsya. I want to say Matsya, something like that, which is interesting because it sounds very close to Matisya, or Matisyahu. Matisyahu, which basically means gift of Yah or Yahweh, or Yah instead of being spelled EA. Let's go ahead and check out the whiteboard real quick. Instead of Yah, because you know a lot of people are familiar with Yahweh, which is the God of the Bible, or one of the gods in the Bible, I should say. We've got Yah, which is how lots of people refer to God or the God in the Bible, really being Yah, right? Which was another name for Enki. Okay, I'm not going to write Enki up there. So let's get back to where we were here. So we've got Yah, the God of the Bible, being directly related with fish, even Jesus himself being directly related with fish, Vishnu, the Dogon, all of these tribes having their scaly gods, okay? Because they have scales does not make them fish beings. It does not make them lizards. Just like you looking similar to how a monkey is looking, being bipedal for the most part, and having a tailbone and stuff like that, having hair on your body, does not mean that you are a monkey. It's a leap. It's a leap and could be seen as an insult. Personally, I'm not insulted because I have a better understanding. I have more information on the subject. If I had much less information on the subject, I would be inclined to be insulted. But I have so much more information that I have a higher understanding of it. Can you imagine what these beings would think if you just literally called them the lizard people? You know, I would imagine that it would be no big deal to them because they understand the knowledge behind who they are and where they come from and what they are. So here's just some more examples of the Pope. You guys have all seen this before. So let's move forward. Now, I want to talk about this, the reptilian gods. And I call them reptilian not because they are reptiles. I do not think that these are reptiles in any way, shape, or form whatsoever, okay? But that's how they're alluded to, especially in various communities. Those of you who believe in the aliens, you know, this is one of the first topics that comes up. Like, oh, the different classes of aliens. You got the Greys, you got the Reptilians, you've got the Andromedans, you've got the Pleiadians, you got the Nordics. You know, they call them the Nordics, which is very funny to me because there is no Nordic area of space or whatever. But they're called the Nordics because they came down to the Norse. That's how they appeared to the Norse people, right? Which is directly related to the Aryan, to the Aesir, to the Vanir, to those blonde-haired, blue-eyed gods who are mostly, and if not almost always, depicted as being white, okay? And usually when they get actors to play out these gods on television or in the movies, they get Caucasian people because that's the best that they can do. That's the closest they can come to that porcelain white color, right? With the exception, of course, of the guy that controlled the Rainbow Bridge in the new Thor movies, right? Like I don't know. I kind of think that they threw that in there for PC, you know, to be PC basically. However, this is a statue. There are a few of these having been found in different places in the world, but it's a representative of one of these gods. And as you can see, this statue sort of has a kind of lizard type look to it. It kind of has this sort of amphibious fish reptilian, like, you know, I don't know what it is, but it does not look how I look, right? I mean, not exactly. It doesn't look human. You know, I never noticed how my nose is kind of large. I never noticed that. Anyhow, so this is one thing that they have here, right? The gods did not want you to mold a copy of what they look like. They didn't want their portrait drawn. They didn't want their picture taken. They did not want their image and their likeness to be captured for the future, for future reference. I ask the question, the obvious question, why? Why? Why would you want to? Either the gods, right, these reptilian silica beings, because that's what they are. They are silica beings, and that's how I'm going to refer to them for the rest of this video, for the most part. They don't want their likeness printed, right? Like, here's a likeness. This is the likeness of a famous person. We would call it one of our mighty leaders, right? And that is who you would expect to see. Let's just say that this particular person came back from the dead, or something had happened and they were able to return to life, because we all know this one is a dead president, right? They would come back from the death. Now, are they going to look the exact same when they come back? Whenever they reincarnate or whenever they return? Are they going to look like that? Because that's what people are going to be looking for. They'll have that image burned into their head. Can you think of another image out there of a godlike being that's been burned into our head of what that being should look like or did look like? That is the image that you will be expecting if that being returns one day. Is it going to look like Jesus? Because that's who I'm talking about right now. We have this image of Jesus. You know, Jesus is this kind of skinny white guy with like this sort of goatee type thing going on, you know, very like soft on the eyes. I can't do it. I don't know how to do it, you know, but you know, that's the traditional typical image of Jesus. Maybe that's why these gods did not want you to draw exactly what their particular avatar at the time, what their body looked like at the time, because they understand that bodies can be changed. That's just the idea that I have about it. Other people would say they've got something to hide. They're hiding something. Well, yeah, they are hiding something. They're just, they probably don't want to get into the intricacies and details of how reincarnation works or soul transferring or things of that nature. So they just say, look, just don't draw a picture of me, okay? I have got my reasons. Don't draw a picture of me. Now, let's talk about their appearance. Let's talk about their scaly skin, right? They've got a skin that is most notable and always talked about across all of these cultures and across time. I'm just going to check in, make sure everything's still working here. Okay, cool. So there's a lot of people in the chat. People are watching. Good. I will jump into the after chat later on once the video is done, just so you guys know, because I want to keep on going. I want to keep pushing forward with the topic. So the skin of the silica beings. Now, let me take a quick time out and I want to describe to you what I mean when I say silica beings. Many of you already know, many of you have already seen the videos, and we've got that breadcrumb, we've got that puzzle piece that there was once an age here in our realm where things were not carbon-based as we are familiar with today, but they were one step up on the periodic table of elements, and they were silica-based. When you think of silica, you may think of something a little closer. Instead of thinking of something flimsy and organic, you would think of something more crystalline, right? So these beings are reported to have this silica type skin, which looks like they had scales. And in fact, they very well may have had a type of scale. Once again, that does not make them lizard people. It doesn't make them whatever animals we understand as having scales, okay? If they could fly, that does not mean that they were bird people, These things are caricatures. These things are cartoons. They're symbolic. They're metaphorical. Pardon me. So, I want to talk about Superman. I've made a few videos about this, and I correlate, and I'm telling you right now, Superman, along with all of the other heroes or ha-ros of old, all of our comic book legends, for the most part, all of these beings are almost always, I have found, the same exact reference. They're just split into their different symbols that are associated with them, their different abilities, or what those different cultures across time have noticed in particular about these beings. Now, Superman is a silica being. He's literally the man of steel, which is, like I said, a lot of times these gods, not only are they represented by fish beings and lizard beings, but by rocks and stone as well, okay? So the man of steel. Okay, now, I ask myself, well, why do they portray Superman's suit, his quote-unquote outfit, as being blue and having a sort of scaly type structure to it, right? If you saw this as an ancient tribal person and you looked at it, you would see that and you would go, oh, scales. Oh, he's like a fish guy. He's kind of like a fish guy with power. He's like a fish god, or something along those nature. Now, Superman's real name is Kal-El. Many people already know this. El literally means strong leader, which turned into our word for God. I'm going to get into that here on the whiteboard here in a minute. But Superman he exhibits all of these traits that the ancient Silica race, the Silica beings, knew and exhibited themselves. They could fly. They had this sort of scaly type skin. Superman, I don't know if you noticed, but he also sort of wraps this thing around his cuffs. He's got this sort of stuff wrapped around his arms. I didn't pull up a picture of that. But this is where our superheroes come from. The word hero comes from ha, which means the, and then ro. Ro literally means shepherd, right? The shepherds of our world, the keepers of our world, those who watch over us and tend to us as if we are sheep. These are our ha-ros, or our heroes, right? Batman is the same thing. Look at the scaly type structure. This was done for a purpose. This wasn't just accidental. People didn't think it just looks cool. It was done because there's truth to it. There's also truth as to why so many of these superheroes don capes, and you'll find a lot of the similarities, whether it be Dracula and the vampires. A long time ago, they all pretty much were portrayed as wearing capes, or the Vulcans, or so many different versions of the caricatures of the Silica race, the Silica beings. This is how they dressed. This is how they looked. Now, they didn't always look like this, so from time to time you may see a caricature version or a cartoon version that looks slightly different. Take a look at Thor. Thor is a Silica being. He was a Silica being. He also dons a cape, just like the other ones. He is the Norse god. He's one of the gods of the Norse, the aesir or the vanir. Look, why would they choose? Thor is he's extremely strong anyhow, He doesn't really need to have this sort of armor type thing on him, but it was done purposefully. It looks scaly. It looks like he's got a fish arm. That looks like fish scales, literally. And that's done on purpose and for a reason, to emulate the Silica gods, the reptilian, the fish gods of old. And these things manifest themselves in our culture all of the time. We just don't ask questions about it. We don't get specific about it. Here's another one. This one is Aquaman, like I was talking about earlier, and his armor also just happens to look very fish-like. Now, you would kind of expect that from somebody called Aquaman, who carries a trident and swims around in the ocean amongst the fish. But the thing is, he didn't have to do that, you know? They didn't have to look like that. It's because it plays on reality. It's got nothing to do with fish. It has to do with the actual chemical composition of the Silica race. Their skin, if you zoom in on your skin, I don't know, I don't think my camera can get close enough to my skin, but if you just look at your skin, you have good eyesight, I've got pretty good eyesight, you can see that when you zoom in on your own skin, you can actually see a sort of scale-like structure to the skin. There's this sort of diamond effect going on with your own skin. But these beings, not only were they designed with a sort of silica base, which would be a little bit more towards the crystalline aspect, which carries with it a lot of benefits that we don't have in our carbon bodies. One of those would be like resistant to cold, or able to withstand very cold or even maybe hot temperatures, right? We are very frail in this carbon body. I forgot where I was going with that, so let's just move forward. So here's another picture of Aquaman. He's all scaly, just like the gods. He's an Atlantean. He comes from the time of Atlantis, and he is an El. He's an El being. Let me check in to see where I am with the notes are concerned. Okay, so we had talked about the tribes. We had talked about the crocodile men. I didn't really mention, but, you know, some of these cultures, they grow their nails out real long too, you know, which women all over the world do that today. I don't particularly get it. You know, some people say it makes your fingers look longer and slender and it's more beautiful. Why would that be more beautiful? Why are long, creepy, extra long fingers beautiful, you know? Probably because they're trying to emulate the gods. They're trying to grow out their claws or whatnot. Let's see then. Oh! One last thing before we get to the whiteboard. Let me see what picture we have coming up here next. Oh. Okay. So yeah, we're going to stop right here. That's actually from Ready Player One. And I'm going to come back to that here in just a bit. Before we get to the whiteboard, I'm going to break down the word El and describe how the word God is directly related to the word El and directly comes from elf. Like, that's where we get our concept of the elves, the elven race, right? We're going to break that down here in just a minute. But first, I did want to point out that these beings always pretty much said that they were beings from the stars, right? They would point out their star system, like I was talking about the Dogon, pointing out their star system to the tribal people. Now, my comprehension of this is basically, I believe that there are other realms aside from our own. I don't see our cosmology as being like this emptiness called space, and that there are these planets way out there, and that these beings are all traveling, you know, at light speed to try to get to Earth because Earth is so important or whatnot. But I see Earth as being a part of these other realms that we don't currently have access to. Now, not just realms in our peripheral, not just realms off to the side, but realms, worlds, if you will, that are also above and below us as well. Now, it makes sense to me that when these Silica beings introduce themselves and they're talking about, here's where you come from, human, here's your origin, and here's where we come from, if they point up at the stars and they say, okay, so what you do is you want to go to that star right there, and then you hang a left or a right, and that's where we come from. That's where we came from. That's where we came out of, right? And for example, in the book of Enoch and many of these other religious books, they will tell you, black and white, there are portals in the heavens. The sky that you see above us has windows that can be opened up and things can come through, or, you know, come into our world or leave our world. And there are these sort of doorways, these star gates, if you will, that there are literally gates somewhere in the area of the stars, and the stars themselves, because they never really move, they tell you where those gates are located. You use the stars as a sort of, like when you're traveling and you have a general idea of where you're going, you look for monuments. You look for things that you recognize, and oh, okay, when I get to that statue, I need to hang a left to get to my buddy's house or whatever. Same type of deal with these beings that come from the stars. I'm not sure that they actually live on or about or on a planet that's near that star that we can't see, that's invisible and all that. But I do know, and it does seem like there's a lot of evidence for there being portholes. There are these windows, there are these gates, there are these doors in the sky above us that these beings know their locations. And whenever you go through those portholes, you can access, whether you go up or down, or maybe even to the sides, I'm not sure, but you can access these other realms. You can get to these other worlds. I'm not so sure I would call them planets unless I was referring to them as a planet or a small plane of existence. That's how I see that. And another thing as well, and then we're going to go to the whiteboard, is Peter Pan. Peter Pan is an elf. If you look at him, he's an immortal. He doesn't age. He doesn't die. He has these pointy ears. He dresses in green, which is directly related to like the reptilian race or the Silica race and things of that nature. And Peter Pan, he's not from Earth. He lives in Neverland, in another realm of existence. And he says, oh, it's really easy. All you have to do is go third star on the right and straight on until morning, and you can get to Neverland. How is that any different than what the Dogon were told by their Silica being gods, their elven gods, right? It's the same thing. Like I said, these are all cartoons and caricatures and versions that have slightly evolved and morphed over time into what we call legend, lore, fantasy, fiction, stories, all of that stuff. It all has elements of truth to it. Now, that being said, like I was talking about, Superman's name is Kal-El. And let's do this. We're going to go to the whiteboard. Boom. So you won't see me any longer. This is my whiteboard over here. And I've drawn this out beforehand. And this is going to be where I want to draw anything extra to share with you guys. But Kal-El. Why was Superman named El? El. I don't have a pointy stick. I need a pointy stick. Let's see. Can I use this pen? Yes. Okay, I'll use this pen. So here's the word El right here in the middle. We're going to start at the top and we're going to sort of work our way down. And then this hopefully will all make sense to you in about 10 minutes. Okay. So focus on this word first. El. This is the ancient Middle Eastern. I'm just going to, speak in sort of vague generality right now because there's a lot of different factors that play into it. But this is definitely the Hebrew word for what we call God, okay? This word, anytime it was written in the Bible itself, it was translated into the word God, okay? Now, this does not mean God. This is not pronounced God. This has really nothing to do with our word God. Let me first get rid of the word God for you. Let me explain what the word God comes from. Our word God, first of all, interestingly enough, remember how I said the word dog means fish, right? So we've got this reverse spelling here of D-O-G, which means fish. But we say God, we say it in reverse. So we have this reverse speak of God, which really means fish. Now, God comes from the Middle Eastern word. I'm just going to say Middle Eastern. I mean, I'm really talking about Phoenician and Hebrew, but it comes from this. Like I said, there are no vowels in the ancient languages. So these are just variations of a pronunciation of the entire word. It comes from this. We would say Gad. Now, in the Bible, Gad literally means luck. It means fortune, right? So Gad, I'm going to write this down again. And what we're doing, in case you're joining us just now, is we're breaking down the word God, where it comes from, and how it's directly related to the Silica beings that we call reptilians, fish gods, and I call the elven race, the El, the Elohim, etc., and so on and so forth. So we've got Gad, which is really pronounced God, because the A is usually almost always pronounced as ah. So we've got God, which means fortune, right? Because God, the creator beings, they're the ones who are in charge. So if something befalls you, you find yourself being fortunate and you praise your fortune. You thank your lucky stars or whatnot. Now, speaking of thanking your lucky stars, we also have our word lucky, right? Which implies what type of fortune you have, or what type of experience you have that you attribute to your God. Right? So you have good luck or you have bad luck. Interestingly enough, there is another god named Lucky or Loki. Like I said, vowels almost never really matter. So we've got lucky and Loki. Lucky just means fortune. It's the same exact principle, same word, lucky. Or do you have good luck or bad luck? Loki, which is basically my fortune. The E means personalized. So we've got good luck and bad luck. So whenever you talk about the word God, you're really saying this word right here, gad, God, same thing. And you're talking about being fortunate, or what type of fortune has befallen you recently, right? Now, it's absolutely unrelated to this word up here, which is the word El or ale. It's more properly pronounced ale, like wine, like ale. Or ailment, like something that ails you. A-I-L, right? That's sort of how that's pronounced. So bear with me, right? I'm going to break this down. This is how we write it in English, right? E-L, from left to right. Now, just real quick, I believe that we're mostly dominantly right-handed. We write from left to right because we're using our right hand, right? But I believe there was a point in time a long time ago where people were dominantly left-handed, or maybe even ambidextrous, which is why if they're ambidextrous, you would see them writing like upside down and up top to bottom, etc. But if you were left-handed predominantly, you would write from right to left, so that you don't so that you don't basically erase everything that you just wrote by smearing your hand over it like that, right? So that's a little side point. Let's get right into this teaching of where the word El comes from. El being how we translate the word God, at least in the Bible. This comes from picture form, okay? These, let me get a different color here. Let's get green, okay? Now this letter E right here is the same as this letter over here. Okay, this letter L right here is the same as this one right here. This word L is written left to right. This word L or Al is written right to left. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now, to the right of these, I have drawn their modern Hebrew counterparts, and we're going to get into that. It's going to make sense in just a bit. So I just want you to focus on this. This is the word El or Al, which means God. Okay, now these are two pictures. Remember earlier I said that this is where we get our language, our written language from. People once used to draw pictures in order to convey messages to other people, right? And, today we have emojis to convey messages. That means you're sad or whatnot. It conveys things to people. This is exactly how we used to talk or write when we wanted to convey a message to another person. Eventually, we ended up adding sounds to these pictures, but I want to show you the E. Let's start with the E. The E is going to be on this side. Remember, I said there are no vowels. So there is sort of an all-encompassing vowel sound, which is sort of ah. Okay, so this is sort of pronounced, the E is sort of pronounced ah, okay? There's various pronunciations, but the E is the same as this picture over here. Let's break it down. The E or the A, right, either one, started off as people drawing a picture of an ox. The ox carried the meaning of strong or strength. If you've ever seen an ox, it's pure muscle, and people would attach things to it and it would pull things that the other people can't pull, okay? So the ox picture denoted strength. Now, over time, as you can imagine, people got tired of actually drawing out entire detailed pictures just to convey a short message. So they developed shorthand. So instead of drawing out the whole body of the ox and whatnot, they would just simply draw the head and the horns. And it was understood that that's what you meant. You meant that conveys strength. If you draw that symbol right there of the ox head, you mean something strong. And there are other correlations, and it could mean something slightly different depending on what other pictures you would add to this. But for the most part, this ox head meant strong. So people wrote faster and quicker, and it turned into this. This is just the two horns, as you can see, and the little head in the middle, right? Now people changed how they wrote, right? Depending on if they were left-handed, ambidextrous, right-handed, or whatnot. And this sort of became sideways. It became this up here. Do you see that? That right there is the ox head. That's the same as this one right here. We turn it just a little bit more and we get our letter A, or alpha, or strong, which means if you're an alpha male, you're a strong personality. You know what I mean? It's the same exact thing. So this up here is written with the E, but it also can be the letter A. It's the same thing. This means strong. So what does the L mean? The L, if we look over here off to the right, it was the image. Actually, let's go back to this. So this, by the way, just real quick, this is the modern Hebrew Aleph, which is the exact same as saying alpha, okay? And it's just the picture form of an ox's profile. The ox head profile. Here's the nose, and here's the two horns, and here's the rest of the head. It's a profile of an ox. It's this head over here, but it's a profile picture of it, okay? And then over here, we've got the L, right? L was originally the shepherd's staff, okay? And it conveyed leadership. It conveyed to literally shepherd. Remember how I said ro? Ro is a shepherd. So this is the shepherd's staff, and it conveys leadership, or maybe teaching or teacher. So over time, this one sort of went over its own evolution, and it got to this point right here, and that's where we get our modern day L from, whenever you just draw the letter L, right? L, or, various ways to draw the letter L. But that's where it comes from. So it literally means, when you put it together, the word L means strong leader. And this is why we call it God, right? Because God is the strongest leader of all, right? So strong leader, El, turned into our word, God, which is to have fortune that comes down to us from the Silica beings, or the Titans of old. So that's what it means. El means strong leader. Kal-El, Superman, was a strong leader. Any of the superheroes that you see in the comic books, for the most part, are usually strong leaders, or gods, or the El, the Elu. Now I want to talk about the word Elu here. Let's focus. Last thing. This is not the letter Y. Okay? I don't know what just happened, but if somebody joined us, then welcome. This is not the letter Y. This is a picture, just like this is a picture, and just like this is a picture. So we've got a shepherd's staff, an ox. This is the picture of a hook or a tent peg. I don't know how many people have ever been camping, but you take your pegs and you basically tie the rope around it and you pound it into the ground, right? That's what that is. That's how they drew a tent peg. So I don't know how to symbolize it, but they would pound it. They would take their hammer, okay? They would take their hammer and they would pound the tent peg into the ground. That's what that is. That's not the letter Y. It's a tent peg, or a hook to attach the tent to the ground. Now, the hook is the exact same as our letter V, or in Hebrew or Phoenician, it would be Vav, okay? So the hook is the letter V. The hook symbol in Greek, in ancient Greek, turned into this symbol, which, guess what? Looks exactly like our letter F, right? I think a lot of you probably already put that together, but this is an F, V. The V sound is almost exactly like the F sound. These are interchangeable and interrelated. So why is this important? The V conveys the image of being attached to something, or hooked onto something, or of, right? When we use the word of, then we mean something that is attached to. So if we take let me get like my lighter color green here. If we take the word El, you see that? Nah, that's too light. Let's just use the dark green. Okay, so if we take the word El, E-L, which is ale, which is where we just got all of this from. It means strong leader, right? These ancient Silica beings, they were referred to as the strong leader. Being Silica based, they were literally just stronger than the human race is, okay? They had different attributes because of their Silica chemical composition, because of their bodies, because of the way they were built, essentially. So if we have the El or the Ale, which means God, and we say of the gods, right? Of the gods, then we would put it here. And the V means attached to. The V is interchangeable with this one, which is the ancient Greek form. So you can say Elv, which means of the gods, or you can say Elf, which means of the gods. The letter V is also the exact same, and actually it more accurately it would probably be the letter U because it's more of a oo sound. Okay, this is all dependent upon dialect and accent and how people's how they spoke changed over time and what was acceptable and what was not acceptable. But the U, the F, the V, and the double oo, or the W, right? These are all almost interchangeable and usually derive from the exact same symbol, which is the hook. That means to be attached to something. If you wondered why in Disney's Moana, why there is such emphasis on this whole magical hook deal, or why the letter V is portrayed as this symbol in so many movies, this would be why. Okay, so we've got the Elu, or the Elve, the elven race, the elf. This is why I refer to them, and I believe it is more accurate to call them elves, right? I mean, you really don't have to pluralize the word elf. It's already plural. The Elu is already plural of the elven race, okay? So we just put an F on it. Anyhow, so we get elf, right? Or we say elves with a V. Now all of a sudden we interchange when we pluralize it. Now all of a sudden there's a V in there. Why is there a V in place of the F? Because they're the exact same letter, right? We just pronounce it differently whenever there's more going on afterwards. And then we add this, which is our suffix that we have added today to pluralize something. But elf and elva is the exact same. Just like if you were to write out the word shelf, right? It ends in ELF, but if you pluralize it, all of a sudden it's shelves with a V. It's the same thing because they're the exact same symbol. They're the exact same letter. It's being attached to something, right? So being of the strong leaders meant that you were an Elu or an Ilva or an Elfa. Different dialects, different pronunciation. That's where we get the elven race from. Now, let me go back to over here. Let's do this one. Okay, so the elven race. The elven race are the Silica gods of old. And certain attributes, certain qualities that they once possessed have made it across the oral record and the written record. We refer to them as elves. The whole elf, you know, like Lord of the Rings elves, and they all carry bows and arrows, and, you know, they're really good at climbing trees and stuff like that. That's just one more way that they were characterized, that they were cartoonified, that they were changed over time from their accurate and truer representation of what they once were. I find it interesting that they typically have these like kind of pointy ears, and they're almost always portrayed as being white or Caucasian, which is the closest that many of us have experienced to the pure whiteness, like this white of the ice right here, or the white of her, you know, her little dress or whatever she has going on there. This is the elven race. It is not fantasy. It is not fiction. It is not fairy tale in nature. It is not made up. It's not a lie. It's 100% truth. The El, or the Elu, or the Ilv, the elven race, the elves, are the reptilians. They are the scaly, shiny skinned ones. They are the silica beings from an ancient and forgotten world. I shouldn't say forgotten, because many of us remember this fantastic world in the back of our minds. And by the way, shout out to Norb's World for making this animation. I did put a link to his YouTube channel in the description here, so thank you for making this for us all. I know he did it for probably more of a different reason, but I'm using it to exhibit the whole elven race thing. Let's go back over to the slideshow here and move on a little forward. This is from the movie Ready Player One. This is an avatar that he takes on, right? I find it to be very interesting that his avatar just happens to be very scaly and kind of shimmery and shiny. I don't know how many people out there have read the entire book of Enoch, but in chapter 106 of the book of Enoch, it talks about the birth of Noah of the flood, right? Noah's Ark. Many of you are familiar with that. In the book of Enoch, it describes that when Noah was born, his skin was as white as snow. It's literally describing what Noah looked like as a baby, as a young boy. And the thing was, these people, they were freaking out when Noah was born, and they said, oh my God, he looks like the Watchers, those who watch over us, right? The beings that watch, the angels, the fallen angels, whatever you want to call them. And people were like, oh my God, he looks exactly like they do, similar to us, but more like them. He was this albino porcelain skin typed being. And that's just a video I had found, by the way. Shout out to Age of Disclosure for putting that out there for me to check out. And also, I think I put a link to his channel in the description as well. So let's move forward with these particular slideshows here. Oh, so this is a movie I just saw. It's called The Titan, and this is the poster for the movie. It's very interesting. It's about this human that sort of undergoes, some various testing and stuff. And hey, welcome, Tamara, by the way. Welcome. She just subscribed. Anyhow, this guy in the movie, he becomes what they're trying to do in the movie. Spoiler alert, by the way, for all you, people that don't want me to spoil it. Please take a 5-minute break and come back. But in the movie, he's basically undergoing these tests so that he can go live on Titan, which is one of the moons of Saturn. None of this is fantasy. None of this is made up. The people that made the movie, that wrote out the script, purposefully and for esoteric and hidden symbolic reasons, chose Saturn to be in the movie, and in particular the moon Titan to be in the movie. Saturn, aka Kronos, aka one of the Titans, which was a silica being of the ancient sylvan, foresty, garden world of gigantic proportions that once existed, that all religions and all cultures allude to in their religions and holy books and whatnot. Okay. Saturn was one of these silica titans or gods or elven race that once existed. And I find it interesting, in this particular poster, they really show his skin as being this pasty, pale, porcelain white skin with scales all over it. Now here, it's actually got this bluish tint to it, which is interesting. I don't know how much I'm going to get into the blue god theory, but I've got a lot of videos about it. Please go check out my video I've done about the blue gods. In short, the short version is they were albino gods, not really albino. They were porcelain skinned gods. And depending on various factors, hey, Save Our Future Humanity just funded $2 and says, thanks for your in-depth info, getting to so many. You're very welcome. And thank you guys for all watching, by the way. I love doing this. This is what I do. This is what I love doing in life. So I'm doing what I love, and I appreciate your support. Okay, so anyhow, they were they were a porcelain-skinned race that were silica-based, so they almost had sort of larger, scaly-type skin, similar to how we have scaly skin as well, but theirs was much bigger. Not only that, but these were the giants of old. These silica beings were gigantic in comparison to us today. They were not silica beings 5 feet tall, 6 feet tall. They were giant in comparison to us. That's why whenever we built their houses and we built what we call temples for them to live in, they have such huge entryways and gigantic steps leading up to it. These beings were much bigger. You would see their skin and what it looks like even better if you were to take a good close look at it. You would probably see the actual scale type thing on their skin or what it looked like. So anyhow, long story short, they were albino, but not albino, they were porcelain skinned, much like the albinos are, very white, okay? And depending on the light source, which is not really related to this topic, so I'm not going to get into it, but there were alternative light sources around back then, Saturn being one of them. Depending on the light source and what was happening, their skin would literally reflect the light in different ways, which gives us what look like the blue gods of old, okay, like Krishna and these other various gods. Now, this has been portrayed symbolically in the media. It's been cartoonified. Here you clearly have what is a caricature version of a reptilian silica being, complete with like the sort of bony horn structure on the face, albino white or porcelain white, you know. The only difference between when I say albino is they don't have the red eyes. That's really the only huge difference. Not only that, but these beings, legend has it that they were very sensitive to sunlight. Not any sunlight, but the skylight that is currently up there in our sky today. This blindingly white, hot light right there were very photophobic. They were literally hurt by the sun, which gives rise to why the elven race, the silica beings, the gods of old, turned into this caricature version, this offshoot that we call vampires, right? The vampires are photophobic. The sun literally hurts them, you know? Their skin can't take it because of that one particular skylight that is up there right now. That gives us our legend of the vampires, right? It gets a little more deeper than that because there are like good ones and there are bad ones. There probably are more, I'm guessing, bad ones than there are good ones, which is why we get into the whole vampires and drinking blood and sacrificial rites and all that type of stuff, right? But here's another example of like the blue gods, the blue scaly gods, the blue reptilian fish-looking type gods of old, that had this shimmering silica-based skin structure to them. This is, one of my favorite ones because it's Mystique and she's an X-Men. But not only is she blue, not only does she have the scaly silica-type skin, not only can she change form and shapeshift, but she also has the blazing red hair, which you will find is usually something that is genetically related to these beings somewhere along the line. The blazing red hair is an attribute that has been passed down through genetics to us today in various areas. Here's another example, blue, scaly skin, reptilian looking horns and stuff like that, which is where we get our concept of the devil having horns. Why does the devil have horns? Because horns means you're bad, like there are lots of animals that have horns. Does not mean that they're bad animals. Usually these animals that have horns, they don't even eat meat. They're not even carnivorous, so why do we put horns as being like associated with the bad guys, And it all directly relates to the stories, the myths, and the legends of these silica beings, the gods of old, how some of them fought for mankind and became the super heroes or the heroes, or how some of them fell and did not take us into consideration. They don't care about mankind, basically. And there's another example here. Let me check my notes real quick. Just want to make sure I'm on point. Okay, so we're gonna push through some of. Oh, here's another one of my favorite ones, right? This is the Emperor, the bad guy. He is an elven representation of the reptilian class, the silica beings. He's got the porcelain white kind of skin going on. He's hooded. A lot of times this elven race, they would wear hoods, which kind of flopped down and sometimes may look more like a cape or whatnot. But they were hooded, especially under certain light. Like I said, they were photophobic, so their skin didn't like the sunlight a whole bunch. So they would robe themselves. They would put on these hoods and robe themselves, which is why the monks and all these other people, this particular classes of different religions, they wear robes and hoods and things of that nature, because it harkens back to the gods. This is what the gods wore. This is what the ancient elven race wore. This is why elves, literally, in fantasy books and movies and stuff, almost always have robes and hoods, just like the Vulcans as well. The Vulcans are the same thing. There's a joke that Vulcans are space elves. They really are. They literally are a representation of the immortal beings called elves, the Silica race, right? They've got the pointy ears. For the most part, they're usually portrayed by the Caucasian people and whatnot. But this guy is the ultimate representation of like the dark elven race, the fallen El, the bad El, the bad Elohim, or the elves, or the Elu, or the Al, or the Allah, or the whatever you would like to call them. This one is definitely representing the dark side of the elven race, okay? And then, of course, you also have something that used to be one of my favorite things ever. I used to love the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But as I started, going down the rabbit hole of esoteric research, I understand the symbolism behind it. This symbolizes the hero, the Ha-Ro, the shepherds of mankind, the heroes of mankind, and it's literally a reptilian being, right, that hides in the shadows. It is a ninja. Ninja comes from the word shinobi, okay? In kanji, in Japanese, okay? So shinobi doesn't really mean like stealth fighter. It more means like spy or watcher, somebody that watches and spies out and checks things out, right? So we've got this spy, this watcher, and there's also the whole pizza thing tied in. I don't really want to talk about it. You guys already know about the whole pizza, surrounding all that stuff. So I'll let you do your own research when it comes to that. But these are the reptilian heroes that live underground, right? And they're buddies with kids, and they eat pizza, and for some reason they're masked, even though everyone knows who they are, right? They wear masks, but they're widely known, so we'll move on from that one. So instead of being the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, more accurately, you could call them the younger, genetically modified watcher reptilians, basically is another way of saying that. And then you have, this is a clip from the movie Prometheus, which talks about the gods, the origin of mankind. And, while Prometheus doesn't want to jump right out there and literally just say, look, mankind was created by these beings, they would call them aliens. And actually, I want to touch on the word alien real quick. We're going to wrap things up. We're almost done. And just so you know, once we are done, I'm going to take about a 30-minute break, and then we're going to do an after chat where I will participate in the chat on Patreon. So if you want to, feel free to check that out while I pull us the whiteboard back up. I want to get into the word El, meaning alien. Where does the word alien come from? Because I'm telling you right now, everything I've seen on my research indicates that what we call aliens, and their different races and different caricatures and different cartoonified versions of the alien species, all come back to the El, okay? So let me get out the whiteboard real quick, and I just want to draw it out for you. So let's look at the word alien, right? I'll spell it regular at first. This is the word alien. This is a being who we are not used to being around, basically, right? And everyone pretty much knows what the word alien means and all of its connotations. So if you look right here at the beginning of the word alien, we've got the same exact word, El, or Al, right? Because remember, it's the letter A as well. There are no vowels, really. So we've got the El. The El race, the mighty leaders, the strong leaders, the mighty teachers, however you want to call them. The El. Then we've got the I right here, okay? Now, I literally is just, it's where we get our word I. It implies personal or possession. So sometimes it means my. Okay, so my mighty leader, right? My mighty leader. And then instead of an E, we write O-N. O-N means one of, okay? So one of my mighty leaders. That's what it is. And that's where the word alien comes from. So the alien are really the El or the El-E-On. The Elion, those who are of my gods, those of the mighty leaders, those who I am not used to seeing, which are the El or the Elu or the Elve or the Elf or the Elven race, right? So anyhow, that's where the word alien comes from. One popular alien in the 80s, when I was growing up, by the way, was Elf, which they say stood for alien life form, you know? So instead of calling him alien life form, they would just call him Elf. No, not at all. Elf is literally just another way of saying elf. E-L-F. Oh, and while I'm on that subject, let me get back to the video here. Okay, so while I'm on the subject, I did want to point this out. Somebody on Facebook, I can't remember who, so I'm so sorry right now, and I don't think I put it in the notes. Did I? Let me see. I don't know. Oh, but, so anyhow, just to cut to the chase. Where did I put that? Let me pull up Facebook real quick, because the word in German, if you guys have this ability, go ahead and type in translate into Google. It'll pull up the Google translator, and then type in, choose German on the left, and type in the word, actually choose English and type in ivory, right? Let me do it myself. This will take 1 second. I'm so sorry, but this is really interesting. So we're going to do ivory in English. Just a quick break while we do this. English. Where's English? Oh, here we go. Okay, so ivory. Okay, so the word in German for ivory is Elfenbein. I think that's how you pronounce that. Yeah, Elfenbein. Okay, Elfenbein literally means elven legs, right? Ivory, like a tusk, the ivory tusk from an elephant. In German, you would say that they are the legs of the elves. And they are ivory. They have this ivory skin, right? That's just really an interesting connection. And I just want to say thank you to whoever posted that. I'm so sorry that I didn't write your name down in the notes, but that is the connection. Ivory tusks, right? Ivory is literally called the legs of the elves. As you can see, this is a cartoonified version of the elven people with their hoods and their ivory skin. That's probably what I should say. I should say ivory skin instead of, porcelain or whatnot. But they have this porcelain ivory look to them. This is due to their silica composition of their bodies, right? And I think that they were portrayed excellently in the movie Prometheus. These are not aliens. These are not spacemen from way out in the depths of the abyss of nothingness that we call space. These are local beings who were here before us and pre-existed us, maybe and probably having something to do with our coming about, our creation, who basically made us. Here's a really good looking example of the reptilian ivory-skinned beings. And we're just going to go through. Oh, I did want to point this out too. Remember, I was telling you, being silica-based means that you have certain attributes that humans are not privy to. What do I mean by that? I mean, you have powers, essentially. Like you have, like this guy, he's a frost giant. The frost giants are silica beings, the El of old, who lived in the very cold climates. As you can see, the frost giants have no need to get bundled up and to put on all the clothing and, try to stay warm in their environment. He actually has red eyes, just like an albino, which is interesting too. And he's blue. right? Just like I was saying about earlier, the blue gods. They are resistant to frost. They're resistant to the cold temperatures that we cannot live in, you know? So there's a lot of implication as far as what is on the other side, where are these other realms, and we can't really travel there without being very, very prepared. Other silica-based life forms can easily just go and endure the cold temperatures. These are clips that I took from Netflix of the movie The Titan, and this is what the man ended up turning into. Now, if you can see, look real close on the side of his head. I think I took a close-up of it, but on the side of his head, not only is he this ivory porcelain-skinned being that's going to go to the Titan moon of Saturn. This is all huge. Like, this is all a message that's being given to us in symbolism. Not symbology, in symbolism, okay? And also look at the bone structure. Like, he's even developing like certain bone structure or whatnot. This, by the way, is the opposite and inverse of this, okay? This is the V symbol, or the Vav. This is a triple Vav. You've got a V or a Vav here, you've got a Vav here, and you also have a Vav here. Now, it just so happens that the letter Vav corresponds to the number 6. So I'll let you put those two together. And this is a close-up that I took of that guy's head, okay? So he's literally got like what looks like kind of a scaly, lizardy kind of composition to his skin, his structure. And this is a close-up of his fingers. As you can see, he's not always portrayed as being this porcelain, not albino. I'm going to start saying ivory. I think that's beautiful, right? Elfenbein. He's got this bluish, sort of bluish purpley kind of tint to his skin at times, just like the Avatar movie, right? The blue beings, the blue elven gods that had tails in the movie Avatar, who had eyes that were a little bigger, and they were giant, they were much bigger. All of this resonates with the truth. Right? Now, it just so happens, I have this theory about the Silica world that basically it was all drowned in a huge flood cataclysm, which is why a lot of these Silica beings, when they are cartoonified as being the bad guys, they're easily killed by water, right? Now, either they're killed by water. Usually it's the giants or the titans as being cartoonified in our world, in our fantasy world today, as being destroyed by the water, or like in BFG, which I'm going to be doing a video on, by the way. In BFG, the titans or the giants, it starts to rain and they freak out. That's because they were once drowned. They have this suppressed memory of being drowned in this huge mud flood that covered our world. Now, it's either you destroy the El, the bad El, the evil El, or the elves, or the whatever. You destroy them by water, like the Wicked Witch, right? The Wicked Witch, you throw water on her and she's, or holy water, or all of these examples where you just destroy the bad vampires, the bad guys, with water, which harkens back to the cataclysm that was introduced in order to get rid of the world's evil and the evil El, the evil gods or whatnot. Or it shows the good gods. This guy is portrayed as being one of the good El, or the good albino gods, or not albino, stop saying it, ivory gods, right? And he is actually amphibious, which is what the Dogon had said in their tribe a long time ago, that the gods were able to come up out of the water and walk on the land. So they were amphibious as well. Now, I find this to be very interesting because a lot of ancient traditions talk about the waters above our world and the waters below our world that basically act as a sort of barrier to the next realm, the realms that are above and the realms that are below us, like in Disney's Moana. Right? In Disney's Moana, they jump down into the ocean until they come into another realm, another land that's not water-filled, right? These beings are able to traverse the water barriers. And it's also interesting, it might have another connotation with the whole passing through the mirror. Let's say that there were waters above us, right? Water naturally just reflects things. So you would look directly into your reflection if you're going to follow Peter Pan's advice, who is the elf, right? If you're going to follow the Dogon, instructions of the Nomo of where they come from. These fish gods, these reptilian silica-based gods, they say you have to go up through that portal, through that window in the sky. And if you're going to pass through the water, you're going to see your own reflection as you go through it, and you're going to come out the other side. It's also excellently portrayed in World of Warcraft, the movie, right? You've got these orcs, which is another interesting word too. I don't know if I should get into that right now, but you've got these orcs, which are basically dark elves. They're the bad guy elves, or the El, and they create this portal, this green magical portal, and they go through it, and they actually come up from a lake, from a huge pond or something, this huge body of water, and it's a water portal. If you look at the movie Stargate, when they open up the gate of the stars, they walk through it, it's liquidy, you know, they walk through this sort of liquid, watery portal. So that's just another idea. I did a whole video about it. Alice in Wonderland, you know, one of the newer movies, it shows that she's flying through this time-traveling orb, and there are these oceans above her and oceans below. And she can go into either one and come out into a different reality. So, let me see what other pictures we have. Oh, this guy. I forgot about this guy. So I was watching, my son loves this song, right? The Thunder. I kind of like it too. But this is from the music video of Imagine Dragons, right? Which is really interesting. They're called Imagine Dragons. They have a lot of esoteric hidden breadcrumbs in all of their videos. But that one video in particular has the whole like people dressed up sort of elven, silica-based looking, and it's got the pointy ears. I don't know if you saw that. But check it out. He's got the pointy ears and everything, you know. If they were reptiles, why would they have pointy ears? Reptiles don't even have ears. There's no need to make them like this guy with the pointy ears. Now, he happens to literally be an elf, a dark elf character from Thor, from the movie Thor. And they wore these masks, you know what I mean? Which is also symbolic because the Silica race tends to wear these various masks to look different. But if you were to look right at them, you would see something that probably looks a little bit more like this. This would be like one of the uglier versions of the gods. The uglier ones were, I don't want to call them ugly, but they sort of classed them out between the beautiful ones, known as the vanir. That's where you get the word like Venice or vanity. You know, like Vanity Smurf, who is a blue god, basically. Vanir, you know, all these words that have van. There's a whole line of shoes called Vans. It's just a plural version of the gods who are the beautiful gods, Vans. It's not named after a square automobile that has a lot of room on the inside. It's the Van, right? That's why the shoe company is named Van, right? Anyhow. So yeah. So they've got the pointy ears and all of that. And I pretty much think we have reached the end of our video today. So before we wrap things up, I do want to give another shout out. I want to thank Age of Disclosure for sharing this video found somewhere, I'm guessing in India, of this kid. I'm not sure if he's albino or what, but I wanted to use this as imagery so you can understand what I'm talking about when I talk about actual beings that were porcelain skinned, that were ivory skinned, just like the birth of Noah. I also want to thank Norb's World, right? I want to thank Norb's World for putting this imagery out for everyone to use. Please, I did leave a link in the description. Go check out his channel. Let him know that you saw his stuff here at JayDreamerZ channel, and let him know that you appreciate his work. He's got a lot of other stuff too. This is my new whiteboard. Here's a picture of what we were working on one more time. I was using my hammer to prop. I was using my little Thor's hammer here to prop the camera, so it would be over there. I'll have to work on that. Anyhow, this is a tool that I'll be implementing, and I want to say thank you to all of my channel supporters. Because of my channel supporters, I'm able to go and buy, you know, things like this, like an extra camera, camera 1, camera 2, in order to share these types of things. I also want to thank everybody in the Ancient Oblivion archive who has submitted so many wonderful pictures and stuff. The contest that I'm running is going to be over this weekend. I did take the contest video down because there are way too many entries. What was that? Hold on. Oh, Karen, there we go. Karen just funded $5. Thank you, Karen. So anyhow, most of the money is going towards making the videos and also my book. I might as well give myself a final shout out. I am currently writing Ancient Oblivion, which is my book about all of these topics and so much more. You can check out all the different topics in my playlist called Ancient Oblivion. And on Wednesdays, I have devoted, because a lot of people try to get in touch with me, Wednesdays are my day that I will respond to messages on Facebook and check my email and all of that. Wednesdays are whenever I do a special live stream, just hanging out with the Patreon support team. And it's also whenever I will touch base with everyone else. If you have written me an email or you have a message that you want me to read or whatnot, Wednesdays are the day that I do that here in America. And also I want to say thank you to Rulaine as well. Thank you, Rulaine. Yes. Let's see. Any more shout outs that I can think of? Let me see. Oh, I wanted to thank Edvard, right? The V in Edvard's name, by the way, is directly related to the double U or the double V. It's the same thing. That's why it's basically the same thing. So thank you, Edvard, for posting that in the Ancient Oblivion archive on the Facebook. Yeah, I call it the Facebook. Okay, that's what, when you get older, you just say the Facebook instead of Facebook. You call everything the, like the WW web. I don't know. Okay, so anyways, I'm done. I'm going to take a half an hour break, and I'm going to, and I want to thank Jenny, and I also want to thank, I can't remember, but I want to thank Jenny for showing me so much support and encouraging me to do what I love in life, and for helping me and encouraging me to write my book and to do these videos, and really being such an amazing support here in my life. Aside from that, I'm going to take a 30-minute break. As you can probably tell, I'm losing my voice. When I come back, I will be doing an after chat in Patreon. So feel free, there's a link on my page. Check out Patreon. There's different reward tiers and stuff like that. You don't have to join. There's no pressure or anything. But if you want to support my work, if you want to support my channel and the book and all of that stuff, then feel free to check out Patreon and see what different rewards there are. The after chat is available to, I believe it's to like anyone that donates $2 or more. It might be $1, I can't remember, but I'm going to be doing the after chat, hanging out and literally engaging. I have not engaged the chat room. There's too much going on and the chat room just goes way too fast lately. So I'm going to be doing an after chat in about 30 minutes here on Patreon. And also keep your eyes out for just regular types of videos that I will do spontaneously in the future on Facebook. I jumped on Facebook the other day and just did a video. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the stuff that I talk about here on YouTube. But yeah, I will be occasionally doing videos on Facebook as well. And I do have a Twitter account now, so I am on the Twitter. So if you want to tweet and all that fun stuff, I do have some Twitter stuff. I've a lot of the pictures I take with my cell phone, I will usually upload to Instagram. So if you want, Instagram is there for you as well. Thank you everyone for your time tonight. Thank you those who are overseas across the flooded areas for staying up late and hanging out with us. And if you just watch this later on after it's already been recorded and presented to you, then thank you as well for taking time out of your day to listen to some of the information that I presented. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and roll the credits for the people who made it possible for me to do this type of work. You guys have a great night and enjoy the rest of your day. I'm JayDreamerZ, and take care.